Hello everyone, Dr. Incompetent here, and let's do a list of 5 dungeon crawlers that you need to play. Now, a few things I want to say before I begin this list. Number 1, this is going to be dungeon crawlers that I have played on the channel so that I can offer you more gameplay to watch and also that I'm experienced with, so I'm talking about games I've actually played. And number 2, when I say dungeon crawler, for the purposes of this video, I'm going to mean typically turn-based first-person games like Wizardry, Bard's Tale, the early Ultimas, where you're looking at the dungeon in a first-person point of view, but it's a turn-based game on a grid, and that is, by and large, going to be the type of game that we're looking at. So, for example, Oblivion or the Elder Scrolls games, you might be in a dungeon and it might be first person, but it's real time, so it's not going to be a part of this list. Alright, so I'm not going to put this list in any particular order, and because I am limiting it to games that I've played on the channel, there's going to be games that are not on the list. And if you have any recommendations, I'd love for you to put those down in the comments below. They might be something that I play on the channel, something I've never heard of, and that is awesome. Also, the final thing I'll say about the list, this is not a retro list. I'm probably going to do a retro list later, but these are going to be more recent dungeon crawling games. So, for example, the original Wizardry, Bard's Tale, Dungeon Master, like the iconic, Ultima 1 and 2, like the iconic games that might be in this space are not on the list because I'm talking about either remasters or more contemporary dungeon crawlers. If you find this list to be helpful and fun, please consider subscribing to the channel so you can see more updates of games that I play, which will be in this wheelhouse and beyond. Okay, so I'm not going to list this in order of what I think is the best. I'm just going to say here's 5 that you should play, and let's just begin cat out of the bag with Wizardry, because I actually started with Wizardry 1, the Proving Grounds of the Mad Overlord, a while ago on the channel, and I was playing it on Nintendo, so I was using the Nintendo version of the first Wizardry, and I loved the game when I was a kid, and I wanted to kind of go back and play that. And as I was playing it, somebody said, hey, have you tried the remaster? And it had been on my wish list. It was a bit pricey, but I was like, I'm not sure. And I decided to dive in, and let me tell you, if you like the original Wizardry, or you're looking for a good dungeon crawler, the Wizardry Proving Grounds of the Mad Overlord remaster is awesome. And it's awesome for reasons that are obvious, but also maybe a little bit less obvious. And the first reason it's awesome is it looks amazing. It takes the feel of the original Wizardry dungeon crawler and just gives it great visuals. There's also good music and adds quality of life features to the game. So you don't have to do as much about, keeping your own personal map necessarily, keeping track of the items. And there's just some stuff about being in town and resting and getting your inventory together. Just business of playing the game that they've really streamlined from the original, because it was a lot of button presses to do things in the original game. But what's great about the remaster that might not as obvious, and it's something that they don't do with every remaster, but they built the game right on top of the original Wizardry, which means that you can turn on or off the updated features of the game. So you can decide, I want to play with the old rules, or I want to take away this quality of life feature, or I want to make it effectively exactly the same as the original experience without, going back entirely to the original graphics. You could put the original graphics on the screen with like a transparent overlay, which is fun, but for the most part, it lets you customize your experience, which I like a lot, and it allowed me to actually finish Wizardry for the first time, which I was so excited to do. It is still, even with the quality of life features on, it is still a brutal and punishing dungeon crawling game. The last level of the dungeon is insanely brutal, and it was a great challenge and something that I was very happy to play through. But as a bonus, I'm not going to count this on the 5, but I'm talking about Wizardry. I think another great dungeon crawler, which is a kind of retro title at this point because of how long ago it was released, is the final main Wizardry title that was released, which is Wizardry 8. And this one is so interesting, and I'm playing it using a good old games version, because Wizardry 8, you can see how they iterated tremendously from the first game, which is just, there's one dungeon, there's one very brief town that you get to enter to, making Wizardry like an open world kind of sandbox feel with a gigantic map and a bigger party, dialogue, voice acting, the ability to have combat where your strategic positioning matters, where you can move around, where instead of just having turn-based attack, the combat when you get into it is still turn-based, but you get to move. There's AoE that is dependent upon, where the enemies are. The spell can be a cone type spell like in Dungeons and Dragons, or it can be a spherical effect, and you need to, you can get flanked, you can get attacked from behind and have to, turn your party around and, get your casters out of the way. So it's super interesting. It is, a little bit janky, which is also, in my opinion, part of the charm. Like, I really appreciate the game, and it's just such a fantastic title, and it makes you feel like, man, I wish they would remaster this, or I wish they would make more games like this. So my first slot of turn-based dungeon crawlers that you should play goes to one of the seminal and oldest dungeon crawling titles out there and franchises, which is Wizardry, and I'm recommending Wizardry, the remaster for the first one, and hey, I'm enjoying the 8th one. And remember, I'm putting links to all of my Let's Plays, and I even have a guide for the Wizardry Remaster if you want to get into it. I'm putting those in the description below so you can see more gameplay and see which game, fits you and you might want to check out. Number 2 on my list is Vaporum, and I'm putting these games in no particular order, like I said, and also this list is going to contain titles that are just, absolute. Most people have heard of these. They're very prolific or popular dungeon crawlers, which I think are essential for a list like this. But also, because I play so many games on the channel and I get so many awesome recommendations from viewers, I like to include kind of off the beaten path titles, and Vaporum is certainly one of those. I had never heard of this game. A viewer recommended it while I was playing Wizardry in the comments, and I checked it out, got it on sale on Steam, and it is super interesting. It is straight up a Wizardry-like dungeon crawling game, and it borrows also elements from Legends of Grimrock, which we'll talk about later, and it is a kind of like BioShock steampunky sci-fi dungeon crawler. So it's not like fantasy based, it's more kind of like, you're in this really bizarre under the water dungeon or science laboratory facility, and you get a mech, and you're in this mech, kind of like a Big Daddy, kind of, Lovecraftian horror down under the water, and it puts a great spin on the genre because you're fighting robots and you're using guns, but at the same time, you get abilities, you get equipment, it's got a cool story, and I just love the vibe of Vaporum. It has some timed elements, so this game and Grimrock are not entirely turn-based. You move on a grid, but the enemies will behave in real time, so there is a little bit of jockeying around with position that matters, and you can kite enemies in ways that you can't do in some of these other dungeon crawlers, but I still put it in the same space because it's just like a design choice to have you still on a grid moving around, but allowing the enemies to be real time. Now, what's cool about Vaporum is that you can make it, and you can toggle this in the game so that you can turn it into a turn-based game for the combat. So as soon as you engage in combat, then it breaks things up into segmented time units, so you don't have to be like master of reflexes, which I actually enjoy myself. So if you're looking for, a more modern and a kind of steampunky take on the dungeon crawler, I definitely recommend giving Vaporum a look. Now, I just mentioned this, and number 3, I'm going to talk about Legends of Grimrock, which is arguably the modern dungeon crawler. And what I mean by that is it's old at this point, but when it came out, it was, considered this breath of life into the classic dungeon crawling space, but it added this element of real time where, you might step on the pressure plate and you have only a certain amount of time to move your character through the door before it closes. So there's some timing elements. The enemies can move, so you're like, ducking around pillars and things like that to fight them. But for the most part, you're walking through a grid. There's traps, there's secret doors, and there's even some survival elements in Grimrock where you have to eat and stuff like that, kind of like Ultima Underworld. And it is just such a well-done game. I love the story of Grimrock, and I like the way that the progression system works, and it's still brutal like an old-school dungeon crawler, and you can do some pretty cool stuff by your party composition. It's fairly limited, but at the same time there's some fun that you can have, and in some ways too, Grimrock is almost more like a puzzle game than a straight up RPG dungeon crawler. And what I mean by that is the resources for the most part are limited. So you can't just sit there like you can in Wizardry and grind experience very easily. So you kind of have to move through and just face challenges without being overpowered. And there's still secrets, there's still equipment, but you might be, you can't buy stuff at a shop, and so you're basically having to find and procure everything on site, which it gives it this kind of survival puzzle feel where you're trying to optimize and make sure you found everything, but you can't just straight up over level, which is interesting. Now, I'm going to throw in, because I did it for Wizardry, I'm going to throw in Grimrock 2 as well. So Legends of Grimrock 2 is another game I played on the channel, and it is a really, really great sequel to the first one, because what they do is they allow you to go above world, go into some different environments. There's more classes, and they iterated on some of the elements of the first game and then just added to it. It's still very, very similar to the first game in a lot of respects, but I like the fact that you get to go to different environments. There's a new story, but it continues and relates to the story of the first game, and is also a ton of fun in its own right. And both of these games are very affordable. They're older at this point. You can get them on Good Old Games or Steam, and usually on sale. And I'm going to link my Let's Plays of Grimrock 1 and 2. I also did a beginner's guide on Grimrock 1 if you're looking to get into that game. It is brutal at first, so you might want some pointers to make sure that you could stay alive in the dungeon. At number 4, I'm going to mention Etrian Odyssey, and the whole series is great. I loved Etrian Odyssey, playing it for my Nintendo DS, and then moving on into the 3DS and on as they progressed with the series. But they have released the classic games, and you can play them on PC in HD remasters. I think these are also on console as well, but I bought them on Steam. I think I got them in a Humble Bundle, and I was so excited to try it because I wanted to do it. And the remasters, similar to Wizardry, they're actually pricier than you might expect for a title like this. But the first game in the series, the remaster is fantastic. The music sounds great. The visuals are awesome. There's some quality of life stuff. But you just dive into it and get the great anime take on the dungeon crawler. It's Wizardry. You have a party of 5, and yet it's not like Grimrock in that it is something where you move, they move, and it's all turn-based, and you can grind. And in fact, you need to grind. Just like the original Wizardry, it's about grinding. Some dungeon crawlers are less grindy than others. Grimrock, definitely less grindy because you don't have the option. But Wizardry and Etrian Odyssey, you need to grind. You need to grind in Etrian Odyssey to get the materials so you can craft better gear, so you can be strong enough. But what I love about Etrian Odyssey is the story is fun, the anime vibe is great, and I like that you get to map the dungeon as you go, and even on PC, they give you the map-making tools. And kind of like with the remaster of Wizardry, You can turn it on or off, but you can have it just auto map for you so you don't have to, use the mouse to make the map. But if you want the experience like the original game where you were on your DS with the little stylus and drawing the map on the bottom screen, they let you do that, and it kind of puts it off to the side, and you can make your own map and keep track of everything, which is awesome. But also, one of the signature elements of the Etrian Odyssey series are the foes. And they are these like ultra difficult enemies that you could see on the map as an icon, and you could choose to fight them, or sometimes they'll chase you and you need to run because they will just destroy your party at the levels that you encounter them at, and you kind of have to get really strong to take them down. The earlier ones are easier, and then they become like diabolical, but they feel so great when you defeat them and you get rare materials. So I love too about Etrian Odyssey the variety of choices that you get with characters. These, expand as you move through the series, but even in the first game, there's a lot of choices, there's skill trees, you are really stretching yourself to spend your skill points and make your party strong, because they are difficult games. Like, you can get run over by even basic enemies if you're not prepared. So the whole series is terrific, but I think the first game in the series is a wonderful starting point. And the final game that I want to recommend on this list is Operencia. Now, Operencia is another off-the-beaten-path, modern take on the dungeon crawler, and it's super fun because, you start actually with just one character, and then you kind of get some more people to join you as you go, building up a party, and it has that wizardry vibe, but you begin in this kind of spooky, enchanted underwater castle, and then you get to move through different environments. The voice acting was unexpected, but awesome. There's like really good presentation and storytelling in Operencia. The battle system is a lot of fun. There is full-on itemization, loot. The level up system is cool, and it's just kind of more of a story-driven dungeon crawler, and it's different than you might get where with Wizardry there's basically no story. There's a little bit of dialogue, with Trebor at the beginning, and then as you go in, you might get some brief dialogue, but it's very, very sparse. And in Vaporum, you're getting the story in retrospect like you do in BioShock, because there's nobody in there really, and you're finding like diaries and audio logs, and Grimrock 1, there's no NPCs really to interact with. There's no story. So Operencia is more of your party members will talk to each other, and you meet people and you talk to them, and it's super fun learning about the game, and it's just a really charming and well done modern dungeon crawler. And I'm going to link my Let's Play in the description below if you want to see what it's all about. Now, I'm going to throw in a bonus option here. I'm going to suggest Legends of Amberland II, which is kind of a CRPG, but also plays like a dungeon crawler, just like Might and Magic, like the original Might and Magic series, Might and Magic 3 being one of my favorite CRPGs of all time, but it really plays very much like a dungeon crawler, even if you go above world, because it's entirely on a grid and turn-based, and you spend a lot of time in dungeons, clearing out enemies, leveling up, and it's got a great cartoony sense of humor, and it is quite affordable, and probably is a title that you haven't heard from either. So that's my list of 5 modern dungeon crawlers that you should play. And I'd love to know if anybody has any recommendations for games to consider. Remember, these are just games that I had played on the channel, and most of them recently, so that they were fresh in my mind and I could, speak about them with experience. But I'm always looking to learn about more dungeon crawlers, and I want to say, everyone, thank you so much for watching. Let me know what you think in the comments below. I'll check you next time. Take care.